Thank you very, very much. It's really a delight to be here, and I wish to thank the Honorable Dharma Masters, the scholars, the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me the honor of addressing you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about different kinds of development of programs in response to catastrophic events, and I'll take you through what those key steps are, but I'll also give you some examples of what they are and different ideas of how you might want to engage those principles when you're responding to a particular disaster or an event. Just to give you briefly my background, I've been involved in international crisis response for over 40 years, and during that time I've had the pleasure of leading a variety of teams in response to events throughout the world, including all types of natural disaster, man-made disaster, conflict zones, all different kinds of areas where we work with heads of state, governments, nonprofits, private sector groups in trying to help coordinate and respond to these particular events. I've also had the chance for the past 10 years to chair some foundations within the City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles, California, that bring together the faith community, all the different 14 business sectors, and the academic community together to utilize their skills and capabilities in supplementing what the government is able to provide within different communities. And when I talk about that, why do we supplement or support that? It's because there's a gap that exists. And this gap exists in almost every disaster in the world between the capabilities of the local government and the needs of the local community. And we see over time that continuing to get greater and greater. So the only way to really address it is to bring in those resources from the private sector, from organizations like Tzu that does so well, other academic groups and so forth. Actually, when we looked at that within the US, we discovered that 80% of the resources really belong to the private sector, not to the government. So why not bring those in? Why not bring in those innovative, unique ideas of the private sector to help out? One of the projects that I was able to lead for the US Congress was a study that we did that applies internationally, and many of you may have heard of this, is a few years ago we looked at all the money that the US government and a number of other governments had spent in pre-disaster mitigation around the world. And we brought together around 100 or so PhDs and other experts in the field to analyze this data for well over a year and a half. And we finally came to the conclusion that for every dollar that is spent in pre-disaster mitigation, there's an equivalent $4 to $6. You're reading on the screen $6 because a year ago we updated it, redid the study, and we now know the benefit cost ratio is 6 to 1. But that ratio is even greater for what's called non-structural mitigation, for education, training, and developing programs in communities that change behavior. That ratio goes as high as 60 to 1. So it is a tremendous investment for any country, any nonprofit to make in doing that. I know that when I was having a wonderful tour here at Tzu earlier, I was introduced to some of the key principles of relief work at the Tzu Foundation: directness, priority, respect, timeliness, and practicality. I wanted to follow that with 5 different program elements when you develop components that help folks during a disaster time. And those are innovation, being collaborative, sustainability, measurable components, and repeatability. So let me talk through those for you and give you some examples. Innovation is interesting. Innovation takes creativity. Innovation says that when somebody tells you it can't be done, you're going to find a way to do it anyway. You're not going to be bound by old rules or old ideas. You're going to look at the problem differently, cut it down into bite-sized pieces, and find individuals who can say yes, and come up with a new and different way to approach the particular problem, not the same old components. Tzu is a great innovator, and there are many examples of how they did that. But let me give you one that I know our team was involved in. This was a number of years ago in Izmit, outside of Istanbul in Turkey, during a major earthquake. And we faced a challenge with thousands of people needing relief and needing medicine. The medical system within Turkey had collapsed at that point, and they asked for us to take over the import distribution, setting up of all the field hospitals and all the warehouses, impacting any medical operation that was there. And we found the challenge was that we were getting medicines in 20 plus languages, and we didn't have people who read 20 languages on the medicine. So we said we need to get creative. So we came up a way of distributing the drugs using symbols and colors. And within WHO, there are 27 primary categories, and we started using those categories and created symbols that we could distribute anywhere in the field to different hospitals, different locations, and put groups of drugs together, making it far easy to classify them and send them out when you had a mass casualty disaster. And it's a system that continued that we used with WHO and a number of other disasters as well. Pretty innovative, worked extremely well. Collaboration, the second point. Collaboration is the concept of bringing so many people together. It's bringing that family, that whole sense of community involved in creating that particular solution. You cannot create things successfully in a vacuum. You need as many people to work with you from a variety of different angles to build the right approach. It gives it a safe place where people can discuss disagreements, challenges, opportunities with all these different ideas. And what I found in the past is the business sector and the faith sector and the nonprofit sector have incredible ideas on how to bring individuals and communities together. Again, this is something that Suchi does so well. Another example was the Indian Ocean tsunami, one of the largest events. I had about 600 people with me, and we deployed into Chennai, India, into Sri Lanka, into Banda Aceh, and all the other areas that were impacted by it. And we found that the problem was massive. You had so many different agencies responding. There was not necessarily the level of coordination that was needed. It was highly political. We were in conflict zones where in northern Indonesia, there was still a war that had been going on for 26 years, civil war between GAM, or the Free Aceh movement, and the government of Indonesia, and the Tamil Tiger issues down in Sri Lanka. We thought that, gee, maybe we can use some kinds of tools that are collaborative and cooperative to bring people together. And that's what the Sahana software was created. Many of you may have heard of it. It is actually the largest open source humanitarian relief software in the world, operating multiple countries. The UN uses it, and the International Red Cross. And it was very, very successful in allowing us to distribute food equally among the different parties. Eventually, we were very pleased to see President Ahtisaari, former president of Finland, help get some of the different factions that were disagreeing into Helsinki, got them to sit down, signed a peace accord, and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. But it's just another example of what can be done in bringing people together. Sustainability. Once you develop these programs, you really want to have something that can stand on its own for at least 2 or 3 years. So by bringing in a lot of people, having these innovative ideas, you also want to look at, do you have a source of funds, or do you have the personnel involved to be able to keep it going for a longer period of time? It has to be able to grow, it has to be able to self-fund, it has to be able to sustain, and it has to be highly visible and well orchestrated and well recognized. If it has those characteristics, you're going to win. It will be a successful program. Another example of that is in Myanmar, the Philippines, and the Maldives, where an interesting challenge was taken on because there were a variety of languages and the literacy rate in some of these areas is low. So how do you receive reports and send alerts to individuals when there's a disaster? In that case, we came up with some new systems that are nonverbal. They use pictographs, and we send out the alert on your cell phone or other devices that are just pictures. And it may be a picture of a house with water rising, saying that it's a flood, and an arrow that tells you which direction you're supposed to go or how you head there. All nonverbal, and we can receive the same thing. End up with an approved set of various categories. There's well over 100 plus different types of symbols that are used, and they're well understood and very, very effective. So again, that's something that's pretty unique and brought the people together, and looks like it's going to be quite sustainable in those locations. Last 2 elements, measurable. Once you've developed these programs within your organization, you want to know, is it a success or not? So you really need to include some metrics. Now, in today's modern systems with Google and all the other types of internet and social media, it's not hard to get the capability to measure how many hits your system is getting or how many people look at that. There's other measurements as well that allow you to know, are you successful or not in the number of people that are being touched, the way lives are being changed, and how your particular program is implemented. But you need that metric. You need it to be able to come back to your donors, to come back to your organization and decide, was this a good program or not, or are there areas that we can improve it and manage it more effectively? The wildfires in Southern California and throughout the state of California have been in the news, at least in the US, and this is all part of the changes in environment and climate issues that everyone is facing. I happen to live in that area and faced some pretty horrific stuff. These pictures are shot about a mile from where my house is during the Woolsey fire. And it gave a lot of pause to how do we manage this more effectively and what can we do? And we found that with multiple organizations responding to an event, you needed a way to pull them together and track them more effectively. So again, a simplified solution of real-time incident management tracking that multiple organizations can use and share data in real time down to a handheld device or almost any other was the best way to do this. We managed feeding thousands of firefighters, bringing together about 50 different private sector groups and agencies, and managing this for the local government. It worked very well, very inexpensive, very sustainable. It is now the system that they use for managing events and fires and others. So those things can work well for you. The last one is it needs to be repeatable. Once you've done all these other 4 elements, you want to make sure that your program can be transferred to another location that's a similar environment or similar challenges. Is it another earthquake zone? Is it another flood area? Is it a different kind of natural or man-made disaster that what you did before could be repeated effectively and expanded? So make sure what you've designed has got the right kind of control elements, the right kind of documentation, tracking, and education is developed so that you can share this experience with others. One of the best things you can do as a relief organization is teach others to be able to do it on their own. You want to have that element built in to any program you do so it becomes repeatable. All those together combined into what I would call some of the best practices that are out there. And I would say the number one best practice or experience that I've gotten in disasters is the one thing I'd ask everyone to remember is if you're ever in a crisis, the best thing you can do is to communicate. You need to tell people what is going on. And you need to tell them it time and time again. Our rule in general is at least 3 times. When I responded to the tragic events in the states of 9/11, I was in charge of with about a 60-person crew, helping to reestablish communications in Lower Manhattan and guiding the government as to a lot of the issues they should take. And we insisted on a minimum of 3 press conferences a day, telling everyone exactly what was going on. That is a standard policy. Other elements, for example, are the collaboration that I talked about, but have a plan, follow your plan. It really helps to have things written down. Listen to others. You want to understand what their ideas are and what their concepts. You may not have the best knowledge out there, so there may be other folks that you want to bring in to you. You want to manage your tasks at a reasonable size. Cut things down so you can get them done. You want to have a positive attitude. And don't be afraid of asking for support. I've run into this in a number of countries where a feeling is that it's a sign of weakness. If we ask for another country or another agency to come in, maybe we're weak. You're not. You're actually much, much stronger. So I thank you very much for your time and be glad to answer questions later. Thank you so much.